ghostly mark. Cobwebs twine and shadows dance in this twilight somber trance. Candles flicker, weary wicks, ancient echoes, time's cruel tricks. Marble figures, frozen pose, amidst the silent sorrow grows. Whispering shadows, secrets keep in the depths where night meets sleep. Underneath the velvet gloom, guardians of the haunted room. Chandeliers in crystal tears reflect forgotten yesteryears, softly chanting distant cries. Through the arches sorrow sighs. Gargoyles watch with stony gaze, guardians of endless maze. Pipe organ's breath begins to rise, filling air with mournful ties. Whispering shadows, secrets keep in the depths where night meets sleep. Underneath the velvet gloom, guardians of the haunted room.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Lady Red of the Black Pants Legion, and with any luck, my audio is working, and we're all here this afternoon, and we have Pup Cam, and everybody's good. How are we doing, chat? Got lots of familiar faces. I'm so glad you guys are here because we're going to have some fun through the whole stream, but particularly I'm looking forward to doing show stuff with you guys today because creature generation, which is always fun. But I am not on my own this week, and it's not Aiden that I have with me. This week I have dragged Krispy away from his art streams to come and talk about something else with us. How are you, Krispy?
Hello. I'm good. Just hanging out on a nice afternoon, doing some world build stuff.
Awesome.
Because contrary to what people may get from my streams, I do draw things other than cursed Furbies.
But cursed Furbies are amazing. Did you happen
of course.
did you happen to catch the numeric workshop last night?
I did not, but if it's the Furby face on the jet,
The Furby
I've
plane,
seen a
yes.
few people making yes. It's spread beyond me now.
It
I
has.
think I made the comment the other day. Yeah, I made the comment the other day. Is this how Oppenheimer felt?
I think when I die, my gravestone is going to have 3 things on it. One of them is going to be Hunch Nuts, one of them is going to be Wrestling Star, and one of them is going to be Long Irby.
Oh yeah.
Yes, we have the Furby cultist.
Yes, I am the cult leader of the Furby cult.
Got the Pit Viper cult, we've got the Furby cult. There's a lot of cults going on for a legion that's definitely not a cult.
Definitely not.
So there is a reason that I have grabbed a Krispy for this week, and if you've seen the stream title or have been listening to me over the last week where I've been wittering on about this, we're going to talk about some comics this week. And as I understand it, you're working on a comic, Krispy.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I am. It's very much a work in progress. I do have some chapters written for it. I actually don't have a title for it because honestly, titles are like the hardest part. I kind of have a working title for it called Far Stars, but it's a science fiction comic, which is a story that I've kind of been working on for a number of years now. Long before I joined the Legion.
Yeah.
Um, I it's kind of evolved over the years, but it really started to coalesce to where it's at now. Maybe 4 years ago, I want to say.
As somebody who's been working on a novel for 4 years, I empathise and etc. with this. That seems very familiar. Yes.
Yes.
I also think you've got a really good idea going on there with. I have a working title, but I'm not saying that's the definitive title just yet.
Oh God, no.
I'm very much the same with my work. It's okay. This is the title I'm giving it for now, but until I've written more of it and had the sort of writing progression and the nature of telling a story come through where I can see where my themes are really strong, then you get your final title. I think you have to be at least some way into a work before you can be definitive with a title.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Because you never know what aspect of your work is going to speak the loudest to naming it,
Sometimes even to yourself, because you're like, well, I know I want to sit down and I want to do this. I mean, I do novels, so I have a ridiculous process I go through for figuring out what my novel's going to be, what's going to be in it, etc. But
we can get into process if you'd like to. But
we probably will at some point. But I sort of go through. These are going to be my characters. These are going to be my character arcs. These are the archetypes I'm working with. These are my themes. This is the message I want the audience to take away. I can do all of that. And have an idea of this is what this story is going to be, but it won't be until I'm about 20 to 25% through it where the unique voice of the work is really established. And I'm like, yeah, all those things are here, but this is the one it should be named after.
Yeah, and I totally understand that, because you really get a feel for things over time as you develop it.
Yeah, I think that's a very normal part of the writing process, regardless of what medium you're working in. But comics are a bit unique, so I do sort of have a list of questions and things to go through and talk about, if you're willing, and sort of focus some of it around what you're doing with your comic. But obviously, I don't want you to spoil your comic because we all want to read it when it's in a state that you want us to see it. So we're going to sort of stay on the high level.
Yeah. That's something I will definitely put out there when I finally get to that point. I would like to start doing pages for it this year, but it really depends because I am co-writing it with Halion over in the Aux. He's a good friend of mine,
excellent.
And he and I gel pretty well together when it comes to world building for this.
Oh, we might have to have you both on stream at some point to talk about it when you're
that would be fun.
That would be really cool. We can definitely set that up.
Absolutely. I did tell him about today, but sadly he's stuck at work. So
yeah, well, we'll organise it for when you guys have got some of your stuff done, so we can be specific to what you guys have been doing that you're willing to talk about, and I will bat my eyelashes nicely at Boss Bear to make sure that we can do that, and that would be lovely.
All right, sounds good to me. Keep that in mind for the future then.
Yeah, that'll be a fun time. I'm also hoping to have Doctor Who back at some point because we had a really good stream with him last week, and it makes me so happy that there are so many people in the Legion and the Orcs who are as passionate about writing as I am.
Just passionate in writing and storytelling in general.
Yes.
I think this is kind of a philosophy that I've had for years, but I honestly think there's a lot of power in storytelling, not just in terms of entertainment, but just culturally and just to the individual, because I think everyone watching the stream right now can think of at least one story that they saw or read about growing up that really stuck with them in one way or another.
Yeah, they're very influential, and it's one of the things that makes humanity as a species so unique is the ability to tell stories, to have them persist through time. Because there's something, it doesn't matter what you're reading, let's say it's Pride and Prejudice, you're now seeing the thoughts that came from the black space behind Jane Austen's eyes, and she's been dead for goodness knows how long. But you can still connect with that person and what was important to her through a story, and that's a pretty special thing.
Absolutely. And actually, this kind of ties into comics a bit because, um, so a little bit of background on myself.
Hmm.
I don't know how often I've talked about it on my own stream, but I do have a graphic design degree. I went to school for graphic design
Is it your
for
passion?
college.
Is it your passion?
Oh, not anymore, no.
I've done a
Because
surprising amount of graphic
yeah,
design for somebody who studied it for all of 2 weeks. It's definitely not my passion.
yeah. I don't get me wrong. I learned plenty of good stuff from that major, but wanting to do that professionally, I think would just ruin any enjoyment I get out of it.
I
Because now
don't
I mostly use
think
my
I don't think I've met a
yeah.
single person who's in graphic design as a job who has eyes with a soul left in them. I'll be honest.
Yeah. Oh no, just because when you're in college, you do fun projects. Like we had a lot of fun prompts where we do package design or just like my senior project was actually very fittingly, I did a little media kit for Scholastic Books to promote graphic novels in schools because that's a big thing that they publish is a lot of graphic novels
Yeah.
for young adults. Which that's honestly where I got a lot of my comics from. I never really got into superhero comics, but more from that and the Bionicle comics too. But that's a whole other story. But uh, that stuff is fun. But then you get into the job field, and it's like, oh, you're going to be designing labels and they're going to be doing that all day and it's just going to be you working with type and it's going to look so boring and not going to be fun,
And
so
if you
I'm
are
fine with
doing
just
something that's more colourful and fun, it has to meet certain advertising standards, and
yeah
corporate are going to have particular frameworks that you have to. Oh God!
yeah and then there's people that just assume that because you do one thing of art you can do other things of art, and it's like I don't want to do that thing, I want to do this thing.
I'm so grateful I get to be my own boss with my art.
Yeah,
It's a very special thing. But
absolutely.
comics.
But
What
yes,
comics did
so
you?
go.
Yeah, let's go down the
Oh,
list.
I did want to add on.
Go for it.
I actually did take a one of the elective classes I took in college was actually about comics and graphic novels,
Oh,
sort of like
nice.
a literary class.
Hmm.
Yeah, and we got a little bit into it, and the idea of comics is actually predates our modern knowledge of it because it's basically sequential art, which is something that has existed since the dawn of time. From cave paintings to Egyptian hieroglyphs to woodcuts to modern day.
Yep. Can I tell
Um,
you a
but
stupid factoid I know about ancient Egyptian art?
please do.
Ancient Egypt has currently the oldest known piece of graffiti. It's inside a cave on a wall, and it is a small figure of the pharaoh Hatshepsut sleeping with her grand vizier, effectively, because Hatshepsut was a woman, despite being a pharaoh. And it's basically a piece of political discourse graffiti in a
That's
cave that
wonderful.
dates back all the way to ancient Egypt. That is the oldest graffiti in the world.
I love that.
Pets have been administered. Pip is currently getting an awful lot of fuss, and Aiden's going to go and make some nummy mush and wake the puppies up for you guys to see in just a minute, because they need to eat something. They haven't had some for a while.
Just tell me when.
Go make nummy mush.
Oh, now. Okay.
The
I-
puppies require
Yes.
sustenance.
So one of the first things I wanted to ask you is, what comics did you read growing up that sort of got you into, hey, I like comics. This is a good thing.
Well, that's an interesting one because, like I said, I never really read superhero comics or anything like that. Actually, one of the big entry points for me, comics wise, was growing up, in the early 2000s. I was subscribed to the Lego magazine, and when Bionicle came out, the Lego series, which I'm sure people in chat who grew up with Legos are familiar with if they're my age. Um, they put out a series of comics done by DC actually that came with the magazines at the time, and I collected a lot of those and I read them religiously. I love those comics, not even just because of the stories, but they just looked awesome. The art style for it was really great. um and then in school I started getting graphic novels like Scholastic books and things. I mean, I also read like Calvin and Hobbes compilations and Garfield compilations. But
Yes.
just yeah. Oh yeah.
The
But
classics.
there was ones I read like yeah. There's ones I read like I think there was a graphic novel version of Artemis Fowl that I got from school that I read that I really liked. and just it's just kind of odds and ends really. But I just like the idea of doing a comic. I drew a few of my own comics when I was a kid. They were more just like like comic strips like you'd see in a newspaper than in full on book. I did make a comic book here or there, but nothing that I finished. So
Yeah, I think that's pretty normal for being a young person
yeah,
interested in that. And
yeah. But
it's interesting that you didn't go down the sort of superhero route to get in there, but it still ended up there. Because for me, one of the first comics I read
yeah.
growing up was The Uncanny X-Men. You know, it was all the X-Men stuff because it was on TV as a cartoon, which
Oh,
got me into the comic
yeah.
store. And I read X-Men for a while, and 1980 Storm was just my jam. But I kind of quickly fell off of X-Men and into other things that I'll bring up later because there are some comics I want to
Hmm.
talk about. But do you still read
Yeah.
any of those comics that you read when you were younger, or have you
Um,
moved on to other fields?
I still have the Bionicle comics actually in my nightstand drawer. But I tend to read a lot of web comics these days. There's a few that I follow.
Oh, I was hoping you'd
And
bring up
unfortunately,
web
I've kind of
comics.
yeah, I was kind of at a stagnant point right now. I could use some new ones because some of the ones I read don't put out very often or
Hmm.
kind of on a hiatus. But there's a few off the top of my head that I really like Atomic Robo. That's one of my
Hmm.
favorites. I think that's who is that? I think that's Scott Wagner and Brian. I forget his last name. Need to hold on. I'm actually looking it up so I can remember their names
Go
because
for it.
yeah, Brian and yeah.
When I
But
was
that's a fun like pulpy sci-fi one I
Yeah.
enjoy.
When I was much younger, I had a evening job at the college I was attending, which British college, not American college, so it wasn't university. And I basically kept their computers in the library, all clean and disk checkup and all of that stuff. That was what I did. And while I was waiting for all of that to run, I'd sit and read Sluggy Freelance. I read Sluggy Freelance from probably about 2000 onwards, which was like 5 years after it started. I don't read it anymore, but that was like one of my first online web comics. Which then, of course, led into reading things like Penny Arcade. I don't read nearly as many now as I used to, but I think one of my favorite webcomics ongoing would be Girl Genius. I absolutely adore Girl Genius. I love its art style, I love its story, I love its irreverence. But I'm also really keen on Zebra Girl. I don't know how many people here might have heard of Zebra Girl by Joe England. That is a complete webcomic. At this point, he's now moved on to his next project, Witch Warp. But Zebra Girl is one of those comics that I think I would recommend to everyone because the characters in it are fantastic. It's wonderful to watch the progression of the art style from when he first started to where he finished. The overarching story is great, and just the atmosphere. And it's a black and white comic. It's all sort of pencil style. There's no over the top color going on, so it's a very sort of clean palette to let the story shine. And Zebra Girl has just been a huge part of my creative life forever. So if you haven't read Zebra Girl, I recommend that one.
Yeah, that sounds pretty fun. Uh, oh, I did look up the names. So it is Scott Wagner and Brian Clevenger. They are the writer and artist primarily for that. As you know, they also have other team members as well, but they're kind of the brains behind it.
Hmm.
And I actually did email them once to talk to them, and that was like a really fun thing to get a response from them back in the day. Just kind of asking about getting into making comics myself.
Oh, that's
But in
awesome.
terms of other oh yeah, no, I that really being able to talk to someone that inspires you like that is great. Um, but in terms of other comics that I've read, web comics, another one that I read is Trying Human. Um, that's one that's about this girl that uh, she gets she's basically like an alien abductee that falls in love with one of the aliens that are on the ship. It's like a gray, and it's kind of a story about their relationship unfolding with a bunch of stuff in terms of alien species being on the planet,
Oh, that
all the way
sounds
back
cool.
from Roswell. And that's one I definitely recommend to people. It's ongoing, as is Atomic Robo.
Nice. We've got some good mentions
Let's
in
see.
chat as well. Looking for Group. I used to read Looking for Group back in the day. It's been a while since I've last had a look at that, but that one did used to
That,
be very fun.
that one does sound familiar.
Order of the Stick. Yeah, Iden Reed's Order of the Stick. Another good
I know that
choice.
one.
He's also going in
Another
to
one I've
feed the
read.
puppies, so if we get some squeaking,
Yeah,
you know why?
yeah,
It is puppy food time.
yeah. Yeah. The one that I've read that I'm honestly kind of surprised that I've gotten into is Two Kinds, which is like it's a furry comic.
I'm aware of Two Kinds. I'm
Yeah.
very aware of Two
What
Kinds. I
are you
don't
aware
read it,
that
but
the
I
guy that
know of it.
are you aware that the guy that does it is the brother of Markiplier?
Yes, that's why I know what Two Kinds is, because it's not my
Yeah.
kind of comic, but I was like, oh, that's really cool.
I check on it from time to time. It's an interesting one, but
Awesome.
it's yeah. It is kind of has the anime trope of this story is going on for a long time and is kind of taking different tangents, which personally I'm not a fan of. Once we get into like story writing stuff, I can go into that in more detail. But I like my stories to have an endpoint because otherwise you just drag it out to the point where it's
Yeah.
it just kind of kills the vibe for
One
me.
of the things I'm probably going to do one of these weeks on my stream is just have a whole stream just dedicated to the importance of the words "the end," which is
Yes.
something that I feel that Hollywood, mainstream comics, a lot of storytelling, syndicated TV, have
Yeah.
all failed to remember why the end is so important, and that the
Yeah.
end needs to be built in from the moment you write the beginning.
It
So there will
it
be a
really is.
stream about that at some point.
Excellent. I wouldn't mind being part of that one. I mean, I know for me that I have a vague idea of how I want my comic to end, even if I'm not there yet. So,
Yes, and that's really good is that you've
yeah,
got that in mind. And if it changes over time, that's fine. If the way
yeah,
you end up there changes, that's fine. But you have to have the concept in mind of nothing
yeah.
can last forever and still be as meaningful as if it
A-
has a point. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think that's really,
Yeah.
really important. And that was going to be one of my questions is to sort of talk with you about what do you think the benefits are of comics as a story medium over television or novels, etc., etc. And I do think that's one of the things that's a challenge for comic book writing is you are looking at something that's going to be a bit more syndicated depending on what it is you're doing. And that can lead to this issue of not having the end.
Yeah.
However, for those comics that do work towards that formula where there is a specific end in mind, I feel like those can be some of the more impactful comics.
I think that I agree. I think that because I've definitely seen comics that are more syndicated that eventually just evolve into having a story. And then I think the problem with that there is that, they don't intend for that to be the end point. And then it kind of ends up just going on past the point of where they think of because they don't know how to do an ending for it.
Yeah.
Not to say that's every comic like that, but still, um, I definitely think there needs to be an end point to a story
Hmm.
because otherwise, yeah, like you said, it drags out.
I think one of the things that's a benefit for comics is that it makes you think in a different way for your story writing as well. Because typically with comics, if you're doing a web comic, it's going to be, I don't know, 3 comics a week perhaps, or maybe it's 1 comic a week and it's a bigger page. Or if you're doing a more traditional comic, you're looking at issues. So you're going to be putting out a portion of your story that in itself is going to be self-contained within that one snippet that people are seeing at a time. They can't just instantly turn the page and see what happens next. So it's kind of like writing in chapters, only you're condensing it down even smaller. And I'm a big proponent that sometimes limitations are the greatest things for creativity. If you give people the entire toolbox to play with all at once, it can get overwhelming. Whereas if you have some constructed limitations, which in terms of
No, I
comic
agree.
books, one of those is you can only tell but so much per issue. I think that can create some really interesting pacing dynamics. And I think that's one of the benefits of comic books.
No, I absolutely agree. And as well, I know for me, at least when I was a kid, reading comics was a way for me to get invested in reading in a story that I could enjoy. I know there's obviously the whole trope of like, comics, there's people that seem to think comics are worthless, mostly because of, the whole idea of pulp superhero comics. And then it also goes back to, and this is a whole other conversation, the comics code and things that were put into place because people thought at the time that comics were causing moral
Oh yeah,
decay or whatever
it doesn't
in the
matter
youth,
what your
which
medium is. You have to have a moral panic at some point, otherwise you're not a proper
yeah,
art
of
medium.
course, of course. Despite the fact that I make great pains to say this, comics are not an they are not a genre. They are an art form. They are a way of telling a story. To think
Yes.
of comics as just a type of or a type of genre that degrades from it because you can do so much
Yeah, I
with
think of
comics.
comics as a medium, not a genre, because there's not only one
Mhm.
type of comic. There's many types of
Exactly,
comics, but they are
exactly,
their
and
own unique
that's
medium.
yeah, and that's why I made a point to bring up sequential art earlier because it's
Hmm.
just a continuation of that in a modern sense.
Yes.
But that was a way for me to get engaged in reading. It was a way for me to really get a sense of drawing things as well as an artist,
Yes.
just to kind of see how things were handled in pages.
Yeah, so for me as well, one of the things, because I said, I started with X-Men and moved into other things that I'll bring up later, but one of the things that I moved into was anime and manga, and I had the Dragon Ball manga, and that was where I
Ah,
first
yeah,
started drawing, was drawing Dragon Ball characters, which I personally feel is an excellent starting point because Toriyama has great shape theory, and you'll learn things without even meaning to by just being a young person drawing what you see on screen that you
absolutely.
think is cool. So, and that
I
that
mean,
was
and
really
that's
helpful.
yeah, and that's the thing for me too as well. It's like a lot of my inspirations come from animation or cartoons that I
Yes.
watched back in the day. I mean, people that have
Yes.
watched my stream know I have a more cartoony art style,
Mm-hmm.
um, which was inspired by a lot of the shows I grew up with, like the DCAU. Bruce Timm, he's a great artist. He's the guy
Mm-hmm.
that kind of his style is behind that, and that series of shows really was something that inspired me a lot growing up.
That's awesome. You do have a
Yeah,
very unique art style of your own where it's at the point now where when I see a piece, I'm like, that's a Crispy piece. Crispy drew that. And you can tell, and that's a great thing. That's what you want from your art. And of course, visual is a really
absolutely.
important part of making a good comic. Last week, when I had Doctor Who on, we were talking about some old cartoons because they were relevant to what we were discussing with him. And we were discussing Pirates of Darkwater, which has such
I
a unique
remember
visual
that one.
style. Yeah, and it was horrendously over budget because of how unique its visual style and animation was. So
Yeah.
we did have that conversation last week. Oh. So
Yeah.
yes, I can
A
see
lot
that
of those
we
old
are
comics had
witnessing a
such
murder on stream. Aiden is being slowly devoured by puppies, and two of them are having a big old fight inside the crate.
the horror.
The horror, the humanity. We're clearly breaking TOS with violence right now.
Yeah. We just look back in 5 minutes and there's just a skeleton there.
Yep, little piranha, so they are. Okay. You're gonna let the big dogs in? Okay, let Ceres come in so people can see what she's wearing. Because she looks very cute right now. And while he's doing that, I think it's time we did some hot takes. What are your opinions on comics going mainstream, aka the rise of the Marvel Universe in cinema?
Oh, well, that's a good question. I I mean when I'm not gonna say I didn't enjoy the MCU because growing up, I mean I remember 2008 was I think when Iron Man came out. I was in high school at the time, and that movie definitely stuck with me, as
Mm.
well as a couple of the Marvel movies, but I never really got super into them. Um, I think that the fact that superhero comics have kind of gone mainstream, I'm not the biggest fan of that, you know, just because I feel like out of all the kinds of comic things to go mainstream, superheroes are probably not the best for that because, you know, I don't know. I just I'm not the biggest fan of superhero comics being the thing that broke through because there's a lot of
Yeah,
different comic stories that I think go a lot deeper into things in a more interesting way.
yeah.
Because superheroes have honestly been done to death at this point, you
Yes.
know.
And I have opinions. When the MCU started, although it wasn't for me because I was well beyond superheroes at that point. So let's start at the beginning with this nuanced hot take. I think superhero comics are fantastic, and I also hate them at the same time. There's a reason
I can
why
understand
they've
that.
there's a reason why they've persisted for so long, and why they're so often people's gateway into the comic world, and now into certain areas of cinema, is because they're easily relatable from a relatively young age to a relatively older age, and they allow sort of for generational gapping. So, you can talk to people about Spider-Man, Batman, all your classics. You've got that throughout different generations and age groups, and it's something that you can talk about and appreciate. And you've got errors, especially when you're looking at Batman. The Batman animated TV show is very different from Batman Beyond. Is very different from the '60s Batman TV show with
Yeah.
Adam West. I
But
can talk, I
it is
promise.
funny you say that. It is funny you say Batman Beyond's different from the animated series because it's a continuation. I
It
think that's
is,
just funny you
but when
mention it.
you look at the visuals, it has its own
No, you're
unique
right.
visual style and atmosphere.
Yeah.
And the fact that that's an evolution is what I think made Batman Beyond so good, because that was one of the few sort of superhero things that I persisted with.
Yeah. And it's
Going
kind of tied
forward.
together with the Justice. It's also kind of tied
Yes.
together in the Justice League's cartoon, which is another great one.
Yeah, so you've got this sort of
And
great foundation you're working with there, and I think that made for a really good choice to sort of try and push cinema. I can
Yeah.
understand why they went with that, but chat has already said some of the things that I think, as have you. The early MCU, I think, was a good choice, even if I personally wasn't interested, all the way up to Endgame, where they clearly had a storyline in mind with the end, and then they
I
kept
think that should have
going.
been the end of this. Yeah, I think the end game should have been the end point of the MCU. But no, they decided to keep going with it, and now we have Madame Web, which, man, my wife and I looked up reviews for that once, and we were laughing our asses off just at the way people were talking about it.
And
Or,
then-
it's Morbin time. Need I say more?
Yes, and of course this filters into what the sort of the big problem is with your superhero comics that I think does lead a lot of people to eventually put them down and not look back, is that they don't have a respect necessarily for a long-term audience. It's always looking to bring in that new generation and only
That-
the new generation, because
Yeah, and that's something I wanted. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
you've got no stakes. It's like, who's going to die in this episode? Nobody cares, because 5 episodes from now you will bring whoever that is back because you want to shift copies.
That is a huge part of it. Absolutely.
Yes.
There's no stakes involved when it comes to superhero comics. To the point when a character dies, you're like, okay, they'll be back.
Yeah, count down to when they're back. And there's no meaning to it at that point, and it becomes very corporate, very marketable, and disingenuous, which in some ways is such a shame, because it's not like there are bad people working on superhero comics. There's some amazing
Oh, no.
artists and writers out there, and for some of the writers, they'll get something really good going and then they get moved to another project. And they can't even finish what they were doing in the first place, and then you just jump to something else. So you
That
lose the
blows my mind.
storytelling.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm with you 100% on that one. It's just insane to me, just how, like, the way that they jump through hoops to bring characters back a lot of the time.
Yes.
Like, they killed off Captain America, and then they brought him back. They killed off Iron Man, and then they brought him back.
Yeah. And that is the sort of
know.
thing that just makes me sad, and is what led
Yeah.
me to some of the comics that I then sort of graduated to, because I got sick of what I call superhero syndrome, which is, we're going to have a storyline, but where we are at the beginning and where we are at the end is going to be nearly identical so that we can have another season in a year. And to me, that's not good storytelling. I'm not interested in that. And that was what
Yeah.
led me to follow over from Marvel and all the different things that I was initially looking at, to Top Cow, who have the Spawn, Witchblade, Darkness, Angelus. All of that was with Top Cow, and they then also picked up some licensed stuff. They did the Tomb Raider comics, and those were my jam. Witchblade is just Witchblade and Darkness are my favorite comics of all time. They are just fantastic.
I have heard of Witchblade. Witchblade does look fun.
Witchblade is amazing. It's such a good storyline, and Top Cow also did something that it was the first time I came across it, because with Top Cow, when they've got a thing, so Witchblade. The concept of Witchblade is it's this magical gauntlet that only women can wear and allows them to do all these sort of superhero things, but there are consequences to the power and it impacts everybody's lives, not just the women who happen to wield it, but the people around them. And in the initial story, you're also following sort of a police drama of how did the main character's father die? Was there a conspiracy behind it? You've got these powerful corporate figures involved. It's quite a gritty story. And that's
I do like the sound of that.
That's original Witchblade. But then they were like, okay, well, we're going to make a TV show as well in the early 2000s. Completely its own continuity. The Witchblade looks different. The concept is the same. It's a gauntlet. It's wielded by a police detective. You've got some of the similar elements going in, but it's its own story, which worked really well for transcending mediums, because the TV show in the early 2000s was never going to look like the comics. We didn't have the ability to do the things that we can do today. And then they went, let's make a manga. Completely different continuity. It's no longer the mystical gauntlet that you know from the other two things. It's now got all sort of Oni demon mythology built into it. And then they made an anime, and that's slightly its own continuity as well. And all of them are great. And not a single one of them is supposed to be, continuous with the others. And that was sort of the first time I really came across that, other than Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is a unique thing all its own.
Oh yeah, that Hitchhikers is just it's a very interesting story.
But it's that same concept of, well, we've got these same story elements that we're going to play with in all these different mediums, but we're not going to try and just make the same thing over and over and over again. We're going to explore new avenues, and all of them are as valid as each other.
Yeah, which I honestly I'm for that, as long as it's as long as you do it well. I don't think you need to have stories necessarily relate to each other if you want to retell something, which I think that's a lesson that J.J. Abrams could learn. But I think he's an overrated director personally. I think he's a guy that doesn't know how to finish what he started. But for example, I mean, Transformers is a series that's in so many different settings and universes and things. And that recently there was that Transformers 1 movie. Now, I haven't seen it the whole way through, but I've seen plenty of clips of it on YouTube to the point where I basically know the story for it, because I'm weird like that. I look up movies. But the way that they told that story was honestly such a breath of fresh air for Transformers, because it explores the world of Cybertron. It explores the relationships between Optimus Prime and Megatron in a very interesting way, where they were basically best friends until they realize until something happens that makes them question everything, and it really brings out who they are as people, because Optimus becomes a leader and Megatron becomes a violent tyrant by the end of this story.
Yeah.
So.
And that's a great thing that you can do with comics, because they have the visual aspect, is these ideas of juxtaposed hero and villain, because you're not only playing with the tropes of, well, how did one person end up this way but the other person ended up the other way, what experiences caused that, what personal philosophies caused that, but you can reflect that in the artwork with your color palettes and your shape theory, which is something you can't do in a novel. And makes comics a wonderful medium, is that you're applying all of these artistic elements on top of the storytelling to sort of really reinforce that. And once again, I come back to why I get so sad sometimes about what's happening with superhero comics, because you've got artists and writers who know how to make that mix really work, but not necessarily being allowed to tell the stories that would make it meaningful.
I understand that. Yeah. Actually, you bringing up expressing things through art styles and things, that makes me think of one particular animator whose shows really stuck with me as a kid, probably more than anyone. But Genndy Tartakovsky. If you're not familiar with that name, you're definitely familiar with his work, because he's the guy behind Samurai Jack. He's the guy behind, I believe, Dexter's Lab, Symbionic Titan, all these different shows. Basically, a lot of the shows in Cartoon Network, he had a hand in.
Yeah.
But Samurai Jack in particular is one that sticks with me, because it is an example of telling a really great story through minimal details.
Yes.
Um, because if you look at the styling for that show, it is very stylized, very simplified detail in a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
But what that allows, it just allows you to give focus to the things that matter,
Yep.
which is something I try to emulate with my sort of styling as well, my sort of cartoon style, where you want to and this also kind of speaks to my graphic design knowledge as well,
Mm-hmm.
because you can get really lost in the details of things in terms of what you're making because you want to make it look a certain way. But there's also the matter of how things look from your mind's eye. And a good example of that actually comes from my college education, because a story one of my professors told us once was of a student who was trying to draw. Uh, they were trying to draw beer foam for something for a project, and they were spending hours and hours trying to draw it as realistically as possible. They wanted to make it look really good, um, but it just wasn't working out right. And what the professor basically said to him is, just draw like a bunch of squiggles, because that's what people think of when they think of beer foam in a glass. Like, and you see that a lot with cartoons. It's not so much depicting things as how you see it in real life. It's picturing it how it's represented in your mind's eye.
Yeah, what you're using
And,
is visual shorthand, which is something that you see in cinema, you see it in comics, you
yep.
see it in individual illustrations. It's wonderful to be able to render something that looks incredibly realistic. Easiest thing for me to grab onto
Oh,
at the minute is
yeah.
Devil May Cry 5. The character models in that, they rendered the pores on the skin of the characters, and the older characters have wider pores than the younger characters, and that's incredible. But it's not something that you need for every kind of art medium. And going back to Samurai Jack, what makes that so cool is that the shape theory that's used to tell you good guys, bad guys, what's going on, what the direction of motion is, it's all very large scale shape theory. It's the silhouette of a character, and then the nuance comes from the color palette that's chosen to depict them. So you've got this big
Yeah.
shape, and then you've got the colors, and that will instantly tell you the moment you glance at the screen who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, what's going on, where's the point of tension, just from using those
Yeah.
visual elements. And then when you then
There's
build in the unique, in the case of Samurai Jack, because it's animated, it's your voice acting that sort of puts the cherry on top. And of course, in a comic, that would be what lines of dialogue do you choose to use, what narration boxes do you choose to put in, and that sort of becomes your cherry on top of the cake, with your foundation being this really strong shape theory and color theory.
Yeah. Um, Real quick, if people want to see a very great example of what we're talking about in terms of Samurai Jack, I recommend one episode in particular, and I believe it is Jack versus the Ninja. Um, and it is the scene at the end where he's fighting the ninja, and it is just in black and white, and it is very minimalist in terms of how they do it, but you get a sense of so much just watching that scene.
Yes. Yes. I mean, it is a masterclass to study, and he is a fantastic artist.
Oh yeah, I love his stuff.
Okay, so we're mostly talking
I mean,
about writing on my streams, and we've delved into art, which is very, very, very important, especially for comics. To sort of bring it back to writing just a little bit, um, with regards to your own comic, what sort of themes are you planning on exploring with your work? If that's something you're willing to talk about, if you're
oh,
not, that's fine.
sure, sure. You know, I'm all for talking about my story.
Yeah, and again,
So
just keep it very high because I don't want to ruin anything.
oh yeah, no, I'm not gonna get too specific. Part of it is honestly written from not so much personal experiences, although there's probably a bit of that, but just sort of, thoughts and feelings I've had throughout my life. For example, um, someone that just the idea of where do you go in life where you've planned to do something your entire life, and then you get to that point, you realize that it doesn't work out that way that you wanted, or you get to that point and realize it's not something you want. Um, I guess in terms of like personal struggles,
Yeah.
um,
Which
or
is a
honestly
very
just
human thing everybody can relate
yeah,
to, but every individual person who chooses to make a story about that is going to have a unique set of experiences to draw from to deliver it, which is what makes individual stories
absolutely.
great.
Yeah. And there's also a bit of finding your place in life. Just finding where you belong. I think that's a big thing that everyone struggles with in their life at one point or another.
I agree.
Because it's only been in the last couple of years that I've really just kind of been comfortable with who I am as a person. I've spent a lot of my life just trying to figure out who I am and what the hell I want to do. Um,
Mood.
and it's
Ladies and
taken me all
gentlemen,
sorts of
therapy is wonderful. Therapy is
absolutely.
great.
It's
PSA,
funny.
therapy good.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I was actually at a therapy session earlier today, and I was talking about you know, art and what it does for me in a lot of respects, and and just how I reflect my own thoughts and feelings in my artwork, and I realized that okay, I'm just basically just talking about what I want to talk about on stream later. Uh,
Fabulous.
yeah,
Excellent
yeah,
timing.
no, it was. Oh yeah, no, it was perfect. But I also get into some other larger themes with it as well. I one in particular I really want to explore is the idea of tradition versus change. Um, because without getting into too specific of detail, because we might just be touching on politics and such, but there's definitely a lot of instances where you see the sort of push and pull between tradition ideas of what people should be or how things should be versus the need for change. And I'm not saying one or the other is better because honestly, in both instances, you can go in one direction or the other and you can have the extremes of it. But it's a matter of just sort of the idea of what those are and how do you find a way to balance the two,
Yes.
you
And
know?
again, that's another really human thing and a great way to sort of deliver a medium for people to understand how they're feeling about things that might be happening in the real world. We have just been raided by the Cornish Knight with several followers. Welcome in. This is WBPL 76, where nothing makes sense, and your time is more valuable to us than it is to you if you've turned up here. Why are you here?
Yeah, we're very surprised you're here.
Yes, we're talking today. This is my ranting stream where I have hot takes and witter about stuff, and then sometimes we actually do some writing. And there are puppies. But today we're talking about comics, and Crispy, who's joining us,
Yes,
is talking about the comic that he's working on. So welcome in.
yes,
I hope you find something of worth here, and please don't mind the madness.
that's a feature, not a bug.
So you've
Hmm.
got these personal experiences that are clearly going to be something that you want to have your characters
And
sort of
perspectives
present.
as well, yeah.
Yeah. So you're going to
Um,
have Shume. Are you going to be following one character as your main lead, or are we going to have a cast of characters that have equal screen
um,
time? How are you feeling about that?
I I do have a specific character in mind as sort of a lead, but I don't want to make it sound like it's going to be the focus because
Mm.
there's other characters as well whose stories I want to tell. To kind of get a little bit into the weeds as just to how I figure things out. There's a lot of myself in some of the characters I write, which I'm probably sure is not a controversial statement. I'm sure that's true of literally everyone who's done a
They
story.
do say that the
Um,
best way to write is to write what you know and put a little bit of yourself into everything to make it more believable. So,
Absolutely. So I at least feel comfortable sharing a little bit about the sort of main character I have in mind. Basically, my main character in this story is a guy who um, he originally had a lot of different ambitions in life. He wanted to originally become part of the space navy in my setting, which didn't work out. So he ended up going to work for a corporate thing as an engineer. Um, and things happen that he gets blamed for and ends up stuck in essentially, if you played Space Station 13, he gets stuck as a gray shirt on a derelict on a space station out in the backwater somewhere.
there was
So
part of
this
me,
is a
there was first, a very, very specifically British part of me that was hoping you were going to tell me that he got put in stasis for 3,000 years and then woke up and his only friend was a hologram. But your story sounds very
red
good.
dwarf. Red dwarf.
Yes, Red Dwarf.
Yeah. But essentially, this guy is someone that he had ideas of life, and then things happen that really challenge that, and he's kind of at a point where he's just feeling burnt out. Um, but at the same time, though, he's also somewhat hoping for a change, which without giving away too much, it definitely becomes a case of be careful what you wish for. Uh, but as well, there's other characters as well, like sort of an I don't want to say like his companion character, but a sort of another character that he becomes in uh, partners with or involved with is this girl who is a smuggler sort of outlaw character, and she's very brash. She's very um, impulsive in a lot of ways, but she's got like a very clear goal of what she wants to do in life, and she's not going to let anything stop her. Both of those characters are aspects of myself in a lot of ways. Just either just subconsciously or just from things that I've kind of experienced in my own life that have made me feel that way.
Yeah, and there's
You
always
know?
something to explore there because ultimately storytelling is about exploring the human experience, and everybody's going to have a unique way of sort of presenting that. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to when you get some of this stuff down and we can start seeing it.
Yeah.
So, how are you
I
handling the actual writing of the story? Are you doing storyboards starting with the visuals? Are you starting with a greater narrative? Are you starting with dialogue and then how that's going to fit together? So, how are you putting it together? Or are we
um
not there yet?
well, we are Haley and I currently are working on dialogue. We just both been kind of busy with shit. He's got work and I've been kind of swamped with commission stuff. Uh, but
Mood.
we, yeah, really. There's times where like maybe I should just quit my job, and then I'm like, oh wait, no, I need the money. But yeah. Um, so a lot of this really started as a very broad view of the setting, sort of like a world building thing. But once I kind of got the idea of the character that I wanted, it kind of helped focus the narrative a bit. Where it's like, okay, so we have a entry point to this. We have a character who is going to be our perspective for majority of the story. What is he doing? Where's he at in life? How does that fit into the rest of the story? And that kind of helped me build things off of that. You know, like for example, in my story, without getting too into it, there is a sort of overarching government to things, but it's more of like I guess you could say like the United Nations, where they're the kind of the ones that um, provide the law and as well protect, keep in peace. But
Hmm.
there's different nation states and things that are all autonomous in their own right. And I'm like, how does that play into the story? What's this like, and how does it play in? And
Hmm.
I've kind of thought that, and certain characters that are part of that, and how they relate to what's going on as well. Um, and it's helped me develop characters from that sort of perspective, where you are just kind of exploring what is this society like in terms of the story, and how do these characters reflect that? Because I mean, when it comes to world building, I think the characters that people make very much are avatars into the world of your setting and just what things represent. You know?
Yeah. And of course, what we're doing with storytelling on a large scale for a lot of different mediums is you don't want to reduce a character down to just a basic trait, but you are kind of stripping away some of the extraneous stuff that you'd find in a real person because you're trying to drive towards a point that you're getting to. So, avatar is a good word because you're not going to worry about
Yeah.
all the extraneous little tiny things that make up a person unless they're actually relevant to the story you're trying to tell. And when they are relevant to the story you're
Well,
trying to tell, then you need to tell those elements really well.
yeah. It's funny. One of the inspirations for that sort of idea of like a character avatar comes from David Bowie. Because I just hearing about his life and things, his characters that he made for his music and things, they were very much based off of his own personal experiences and things he went through. Like the Thin White Duke character that he came up with, that was very much based off of how he was feeling at the time, where he had like gone so hard with things. He, really pushed himself and kind of burnt himself out. Partially due to cocaine use, but um, it just kind of left him feeling like someone that was just, you know, a wasted husk, a thin white duke, if you will. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, you got all of this
so
accolade
it,
for the effort that you've put in, but what's left in the aftermath is not necessarily what you'd have wanted yourself to be. Yeah.
yeah. Also, I will be right back.
Yep, no problem. So one of the things I said that I wanted to talk about, and we'll see what chat thinks about this, is some of the comics that I grew up with, and I've sort of segued into it a little bit further back, but I moved from mainstream comics into Top Cow, and following things like Spawn, Witchblade, Darkness, Angelus, which I really loved how much grittier those comics were than the sort of more noble storytelling that was going on in some superhero comics, and the very sort of black and white and heavy-handed social commentary that was going on in other comics. I just really wanted some personal stories of characters that weren't necessarily definitively good or bad, and the Darkness was a absolutely fantastic series for that, and the Angelus storylines that went alongside that were fantastic as well, where it was like, yeah, angels and good doesn't always mean nice. So I really enjoyed those, but some of the other comics that I've really enjoyed have been ones that really played with the visual part. 30 Days of Night is a fantastic comic. I'm not going to talk about the whole series because it had some stuff happen, but the original 30 Days of Night, I thought that comic was amazing because it was very minimalist in both its dialogue and narration, and also its visual style. Its visual style is deliberately cloudy, and I thought that was a phenomenal thing to do with a comic.
That's a comic I wouldn't mind checking out sometime.
I am familiar with the Yakuza series, Ramshackle, and Kazuma Kiryu is everybody should know about him. And the shenanigans Majima gets up to. Go on, Chrissy. What were you going to say?
Oh no, I just saying I'm familiar. I wouldn't mind reading the 30 Days of Night series, but also another. It's not so much a comic, but I guess it's more of a magazine. I want to check out is 2000 AD. If people aren't familiar, they're the ones that came up with the idea, or came up with Judge Dredd and a bunch of other characters.
Judge Dredd's a time. That is a unique comic feel. Very, very unique.
I want to get a copy of the Judge Dredd Alien tie-in that they did, because I think that was really fun.
Talking of Alien tie-ins, one of my favorite comics and it's because it's ridiculous. They did the most ridiculous crossover. It's called Mindhunter, and it's Witchblade with the Darkness, Predator, and Alien. And at one point you have it's the Predator ends up wearing the Witchblade. And it's just amazing. It's the most ridiculously over-the-top story that just does its own thing, but it's just fabulous. And managing to get those different characters together and have something meaningful happen was amazing.
Yeah.
Vampirella versus Aliens. Yes, I'm aware of that one.
Speaking of over-the-top comics that are just visually appetizing, one that I cannot recommend people check out enough is Kill 6 Billion Demons. That is a fantastically illustrated webcomic.
Yes.
It is about a girl who basically gets sucked into an acid trip of a universe, I think as Goat put it one time on the podcast. The guy that did that, if you've played the game Lancer, it is the same guy who did the art for Lancer that's behind that comic. But it is probably one of the best illustrated comics that I've seen, and it's got such an interesting mythology and story behind it. And honestly has like some characters whose struggles they go through are I don't want to give things away, but there's characters whose struggles that they go through that I think that they do a better job of explaining how it is to be certain kinds of people in society better than most other things, because they tell it in a way that gets you invested. They don't try to ham-fist things in there. And I love it for that. And again, the art style for it is fucking awesome. It is such a beautiful comic. I highly recommend people check out Kill 6 Billion Demons.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it and know some people who read it. I haven't read all of it myself, but yeah, it's a good pick. It's a very good pick. Yeah, Vampirella versus Aliens is one of the worst ideas throughout history, which is quite impressive.
That sounds like a hell of an idea.
A random vampire decides that the best way to fight an alien is to bite it. Yeah, that is basically, the premise of that comic, and it is very ridiculous. Very, very ridiculous.
You want to bite the creature that has acidic blood.
Yes, and then, it becomes a vampire, and oh god, it's such a dumb comic. It's very fun, though. It's very fun.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So the last thing I'm sort of going to touch on from one of the things that I wanted to talk about before we head over to Shoal for the day was going back to Marvel and comics as a medium and their benefits and the like. One of the book series that I was reading before I emigrated to the US was the Anita Blake series. The first book of which I think everyone should read, and all the latter books of which only women should read who are, happy to slowly descend into the realms of smut fiction, which is fine.
Ah,
But the first book's really, really good. And Marvel picked up the Anita Blake series to make a comic out of some of the initial books. They haven't done all of them, which is for the best. But they did pick up and do some of the initial books. And it was fascinating for me to go from, I've read this novel that's now being faithfully translated into a comic, and that was what made the Marvel comics so worthwhile, is they are a faithful comicization of the novels. And that meant that certain elements that I'd read in Laurel K. Hamilton's prose no longer became things that I was focusing on because of words that were put in front of me, but because of how scenes had been set up. And the scene that sort of really hammered home to me how amazing it is that we can operate in these different mediums and the different shorthands that we use in different mediums was a scene where there's a young lad coming to the place where Anita Blake works for an issue, and how that's depicted in the book and how that's depicted in the comic. So for those of you who don't know, the conceit of Anita Blake is that she is in the original book, so she finds out more about herself later, but in the initial books she works with the police department because she raises zombies for a living. This is a world where the supernatural have effectively come out of the closet and gone, look, yes, we exist. Zombies are a thing, vampires are a thing, werewolves are a thing. We all exist, and it would just be better for everyone if we figured out a way that society could just operate without all of this pretending. So people know that vampires exist, people know that werewolves exist, and there's some stigmas that go with different things and all the sort of stuff that you'd expect, but this is a world where the supernatural is believed in because it's physically there. So she raises zombies for a living, which can either help with murder investigations, it can be useful for therapy for people who just, need to tell their abuser or whatever, get things off their chest, they can move on with their lives. It helps with resolving will disputes. So this is what she does for a job.
I just like the idea of someone like pouring their heart out, just like in a therapy session, and then it just pans over and there's just a zombie chained to the wall with a clipboard, just like.
It's not quite like that, but yeah. But it's this wonderful, wonderful concept of the abnormal having become normal, which makes a lot of stories really interesting. I mean, it's why the original Alien movie worked so well, is unlike everything else you had going on at the time with Star Trek, where it was very intelligent people in space, you're effectively following space truckers who then get slasher movied to death by an alien. It's great. So
Space. Sorry, side note: Space Truckers is also an amazing movie. I highly recommend people watch that.
I love it, when things that are sort of this extraordinary thing are now being treated as normal, and the stories you can tell with that. So Anita Blake works for an agency where she does necromancy for the benefit of society, and there's various other people that work for the agency to cover other things, and she's got a sleazeball corporate boss. So on this one particular day, she's gone back to the office, and there's this young lad there who's just turned 18, and he wants to become a vampire. And his mum has brought him to the office to have a consultation because, of course, that's kind of a big deal. This is affects the rest of your life decision, and that there's positives and there's a lot of negatives. And at 18, are you really in a position to make those decisions? And that's what you're seeing in the novel through the lens of Anita Blake, with her sort of thinking, this kid's too young to make that decision and clearly doesn't understand all the nuances. And you sort of see her internal monologue and thoughts about it, but she also doesn't want to dictate somebody's life to them and etc. So what she does is she says, there's all these things you need to think about. Here is my card. I suggest you take some time to think, and if you have questions, you can contact me here and we can talk about it so you make an informed decision. Meanwhile, her corporate boss, who's looking for a quick sale on some part of it or the other, or who wants this family to walk away with a positive impression, he then sort of comes up on the side. And in the novel, you get this moment where you sort of really focus in on the fact that he plucks the contact card out of the mother's hand, and you sort of see Anita reacting to that. So it's very obvious that she's annoyed that her boss is interfering with her trying to make sure this kid makes an informed decision. And it gives you some good characterization of the boss, of Anita, and of the world as well, and how people treat the supernatural in it. Well, when you translate that to a comic medium, you don't have that internal monologue there, unless you're writing a Spider-Man story, which that's not what they did. And you're using the sort of visual mediums to do it. So in the comic, it's much more subtle how they do the thing with the card, because, of course, it's just one panel where the boss has his hand on the card, taking it away from the mother. It's like 1 to 2 panels, and it's not the focus of the panel, because you've got the characters' faces and all the different things going on, because you're now in a visual medium. So what they did was they translated the sleaze of the boss and his not necessarily thinking about what's best for the kid, but what's best for the company, into his shape language and the color theory of what he's wearing and his facial expression.
I love that.
So you
That's great.
Yes, so you walk away from the scene with the same impression. It's faithful to the book, but you've received that information in a completely different way. And that's what makes comics really cool, is that they allow you to have this visualization rather than it coming just from the words. And I think that can be, you said that comics were one of the things that helps you to get into reading. And, obviously one thing applies to all people, but boys often tend to be more visually stimulated in younger ages.
Absolutely.
Comics are just such a wonderful medium for that.
Yeah, and honestly, it really is true though, but a picture is worth 1,000 words, because in a single panel, you can give such a good indication of things that are going on without any dialogue.
Yes.
That
but that's
it
only
tells the
if
reader,
you put it together correctly. If you make the scene too
100%.
busy, then you miss the point. So yeah, and that's the mastery of comics, which I think is really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm not saying I'm an expert by any means. I love the shit is all, but just from my own observations, it's definitely something to think about.
I think there's definitely a lot of benefit as well to not being an expert in certain matters, to sort of the process of learning. I am not qualified to be talking about anything I talk about on these streams. I do not have a degree in English literature in the slightest. I just really like writing.
Yeah. Well, I kind of look at it this way, and it's actually a fun point that I brought up with my therapist earlier. So there's this music podcast that I listen to. Mm-hmm. It's called No Dogs in Space. I highly suggest people check it out if they want to get into some interesting stories behind some certain bands out there. But a lot of the bands that they covered were punk bands, and I don't mean punk bands from like the 2000s, like Blink-182 and shit. Like I Hate My Mom and Dad Town kind of deal. I'm talking about like the original punk movement that happened in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
And a lot of those bands and a lot of that movement was very much DIY. It was very much people that wanted to do something, but they didn't know how to do it. So they just did it their own way and figured it out their own way. And because of that, we got amazing bands like the Ramones. We got, we got the Stooges. We got all these different bands that just brought such amazing new things to music that still reverberate today.
Yes.
And I think there's something to that sort of thing, because that to me personally is sort of the ethos of what punk is supposed to be. The idea of doing things your own way because it's how you want to do them, and figuring out how to do them in a way that works for you. And I think that really applies to a lot of, art and writing in general. I think that there's a lot, like you said, there's a lot of benefit of going into this, not sort of having that sort of professional, like it needs to be like this mindset, because it is limiting. And I will speak that from personal experience, because for a long time I used to really worry about my art style and how it's like I want to be like this artist, but I'm not.
Yeah.
And it's only been in the past couple of years, in large part due to being part of the BPL and stuff. Like you said at the beginning, you can tell what my art style is, and that's actually something I really take pride in now, because like I draw in a different way from normal people, but it means that I stand out, and I really, that's something that I really appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
being able to do.
Yeah, it's why I am so passionate about my art senpai who got me to where I'm at with what I'm doing. Because when she saw a piece of my art for the first time, I was at a phase where I still considered myself very amateur. I wasn't looking to become an artist. I was just a hobbyist because I enjoyed it. And I'd been told, oh, well, you can't really, you don't have these skills, you don't have those skills, and this is possibly not for you. And I felt like I had to draw without lines and have things be more painterly because that's what everyone was doing. And no, that's not what I'm best at. I'm best at really crisp line art. And she encouraged me to push my shadows, push my colors. I then went and got myself Mark Brunette's art school and started studying that. And 2 terms into that, where I'd sort of really mastered my brushes and my line work, was when I drew the Hunchback piece. And then the BPL happened, and I've been drawing mechs ever since, and then that was absolutely fantastic. And I now have my own unique style that doesn't come from trying to be specifically someone else, but by accepting what I'm good at, and then bolting new things onto that. My grasp of perspective has gotten better, and all these other things. So yeah, I think coming in as a amateur can be a really good thing, but you also need to have that drive to want to improve your craft, which isn't to say that you have to go and study and be like everyone else, but to just want to be better every day with what you're doing.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point to make there, is the idea of like, there is very much the sort of mindset where you need to do this or X or Y thing studying wise to do art. No, that's not the case. I definitely don't think it's the case.
Yes.
I think what it is, rather, or what you should do is, do things that you enjoy. Draw what you enjoy. Draw what you love. Because that's honestly, if you're not having fun while doing art, what's the point? What's the point of doing it if you're not getting something that satisfies you out of it? However, while you do that stuff, I think it's worth challenging yourself to try different things when you do it.
Yes. Yeah, and always be looking to go, okay, well, what can I do this time round that pushes me slightly further than where I was last time round?
Absolutely. And I don't know if I've said this on my own stream, but part of the thing that I love about streaming like I do is that a lot of it is very improv, and it's just me kind of going off the cuff. But that forces me to kind of break from my comfort zone in how I draw, and just kind of has me try new things at the moment, just off the cuff. And because of that, I honestly do. I fully believe that my streaming has allowed me to get a lot faster at what I do in terms of drawing.
Which is always a benefit as an artist. It's just getting faster.
Yeah. Well, it's like for people that watched my stream this week, I did a drawing of David Lynch because he is sort of like a memorial
piece. It was really good.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate hearing that. Thank you. But the thing about that is, and I only realized this later in the day, it's like I did that piece in maybe an hour. I want to say that portrait. Something like that maybe 5 years ago would have taken me 2 to 3 times that long. So there's definitely something to be said about just practicing and pushing yourself that really gets you to these sorts of places.
Yeah, and that's the same for all creativity and just most skills in general. If you use it and you keep using it, you'll innately get better at it.
Yeah.
Somebody asked, it was Fana asked, when will we see a new art drive? Goob Supply needs deflating. I'm actually only going to be doing 2 Goob drives this year because Iden and I have a massive move coming up a little bit later on in the spring, going into the summer. Our lives are going to be a little bit up in the air because we're having a big life change, moving back up to Washington State where we have property. So it's going to be a time, and they're going to have an impact on some things. So I'm going to do one for midsummer and one for sort of midwinter / Christmas. So there will only be 2 Goob drives from me this year.
It'll still be fun either way. So
yes, I always enjoy doing the Goob Drive pieces, and there's storytelling that goes into those as well with how they get built. And oh god, I'm dreading how many people I'll end up putting in this year's pieces because it was 50.
You did put a lot in last year's.
54.
I was like, holy shit.
54.
That must have taken a while.
It took me all month. I literally worked on nothing else for a month.
Yeah, I believe that.
So yeah, that's going to be time. Okay, well we've just cleared 4 o'clock. We're coming up on quarter past the hour, which means we should really be moving over to Shoal. You're very welcome to stay and do some world building with us, Crispy. But thank you very much for talking with me about
I'll
comics.
absolutely hang out.
Yeah, and your
No,
comic.
you're welcome, and I'll absolutely hang out.
Awesome.
So, if you want me to, I'm all for world building. World building is one of my favorite things. So.
All right, so we're going to move over to Shoal for a bit. For anybody who hasn't been here before and what we're up to, Shoal is a community-built setting that we're working on. The concept of it is that it is an ocean moon orbiting a large gas giant in its own solar system. And it is a predominantly water world where we're planning on having the special thing about this being underwater mechs, because, there's not been as much work done on underwater mechs as other types. And we decided that they're...
I'm here for that.
Well, the mechs that we have here they're called the Titans when we get to them. We haven't designed them yet, but we're going to get to it. And they're partially infused with psionic coral. So they're going to be sort of semi-fantasy, mostly sort of realistic, and we're building the world that all of this goes into, and chat has been very helpful and instrumental in this. So the first thing I need to do is I need to shrink PupCam a little bit so we can see what we're doing. Unfortunately, PupCam did end up a little bit blurry, and I can't fix that once stream starts, but oh well.
The puppies have scattered. They're probably napping in the corner somewhere.
They are having a little sleep at the minute.
Yeah. At least they're asleep. Unlike I had to kick my cat out because, like I said earlier, I was pretty sure he was going to hop up on my tower, and I don't need to have my computer rebooted in the middle of stream.
Yeah, not the best thing. So the last couple of weeks with Shoal, we have figured out, roughly what the setting was going to be, some of the ideas we had for it. Last 2 weeks, we started really hammering down on what we needed physics-wise, and we're not going into this in full maths, but physics-wise of how the solar system works, how many planets there are. We decided there was 9. 2 of them are gas giants. The second gas giant is called Tomb, which is Tom, but wider. So we've got some references going on. That was, I think it was
outstanding.
Bully Snake came up with that. So we've got these little things going in, and chat has had some wonderful ideas of elements that we should put in. And we said that this week we were going to start having a look at some of the life forms on our world of Shoal. I'm not going to go back to some of the stuff we were talking about last week with... what the night sky would look like and the seasons. I did say that we'd do that, but Ninja Turtle is very kindly making a orbiting model for me in some software.
Why?
He's managed to get an Earth-sized moon orbiting a Jupiter-sized planet. The rest of it is not quite cooperating as yet, and I haven't had a chance to look at it. So I figure we'll come back to that, and Ninja Turtle and I will have a look at that and see where we're going. But he's doing some wonderful things with the software that he's got to make things work. If people have got it working in Kerbal Space Program, that's even better. If you have modeled any of this nonsense, let me know. My plan this week as well is to go and bat my eyelashes at Boss Bear and see if he's willing to let me have a thread in the Orcs where we can put all of this stuff up, so I can put resources up so you guys can see where we've got to without having to wait for me doing a recap every week. So I will have a chat with him about that. I just didn't get time this week because our heating went out. It's been a time. It's been a week, chat. It's been a week. So that's my goal for next week, is have that online. But we need to create some cool creatures. I'm down for having an idea of Selkies or something Selkie-like. Selkies are a very cool critter. So I've got some notes for us to work through. And we're going to make some life balls. Go for it.
I will say this much. It is very opportune that I've been playing Subnautica recently then, because
I love Subnautica.
Absolutely contribute.
Oh, it's such a good game.
It is not a game to play if you're afraid of the deep ocean. I will say that much.
One of my friends has horrendous thalassophobia and he can't play it. Bless him.
Yeah,
and he's watched me play it, and I don't know why he did that to himself.
Well, I'll speak from experience. I understand that because last night I was creeping around in a little submarine in the one biome where it's just desert and giant Leviathan creatures.
Yep.
And I was scared half the time.
Subnautica is one of those games where I really wish I could have it wiped from my memory just so I can experience it for the first time all over again.
I agree with that.
It's
such a fun game.
such a good game, especially when
It's so
you
beautiful.
land and you're in the lovely shallows, and it's colourful, and you've got this rich alien life and all of these things to read about, and you start getting an idea of how the planet works, and then you have to go over to the ship, and you're like, yeah, I want to save all of these fish because it's not okay for them all to die of radiation, and I'm going to sort this problem out. What the hell was that? And the what the hell was that just keeps going, because every time you overcome your fear of something and figure out how to deal with it, you then have to go deeper, and there's another one, and it's worse.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
The other thing I love
I found
about
this cave. Oh no.
the other thing I love about Subnautica, which goes into bringing in real world into non-real world things to give it more believability. Subnautica did something that gives it its feel, that makes it feel like you're actually underwater and your oxygen running out is actually a problem. And that was, they modelled Snell's window. For anybody who doesn't know, Snell's window is the phenomena where when you're underwater and you look up towards the surface, there's like a circle of lighter water. That is Snell's window, and the reason that happens is because as light penetrates water, due to the refraction through air and water being different, and how it then reflects back upwards, you effectively end up with a circle of light that gets reflected back up until you get to the point where the light no longer reflects back up and is just absorbed further down. That's Snell's window, and you get that in real water, and it's something that we're just sort of naturally aware of if you've ever been swimming in any body of water ever. That's modelled in Subnautica so that you get that underwater feel, and that is such a cool thing to bring over to sell the setting. It's really, really cool.
I love that. So to go back to the shoal here,
yes.
I'm absolutely down to help with creatures
Wonderful.
and submersible mechs, because mechs are something I quite enjoy drawing. If people didn't know that.
Yes, and I know I've already spoken to you and Stryker about it, but once we get this setting further along later in the year, I think it'd be really cool to commission some of the other artists in the BPL to maybe do some artwork for some of the things that we create. And I'm totally
here for that.
Yeah, I'm also looking forward to, in November, which is National Novel Writing Month, seeing if we can be far enough along with our setting and our world building and our characters and how the coral works and what the mechs are like, to see if people can write some short stories. And that's what we'll do through November, is look at doing some actual story writing in the setting, which should be really fun. Really, really fun. But to do that, we need to have some life forms. So let's work through what we've got.
Life forms.
We'll start with land masses. Go for it.
Okay, real quick question in terms of life forms.
Yes.
In terms of sentience, what's the highest we're going?
So the people of Shoal are equivalent to, our level of intelligence, and are effectively just slightly more advanced than we are. They're just beginning sort of near space exploration and exploitation of resources, but they're not really into interstellar travel yet, or going too far. So they're just slightly beyond where we're at. Animal.
So they're not humans.
No. These are going to be the Mern folk, the Shoal folk, whatever we decide to call them. We're probably not going to get to sentient life forms today, because
that's fine. Yeah. That's the thing I wanted to make sure to double check.
Once
because
we
that will
do get to that, we're then going to get to things like culture and religion and all the different influences that come in there. So we're going to put sentient species off until another week, where they can have their own week where we really, really focus. But for plants and basic animals, I think we can get a load of that knocked out today. So things we decided last week. Agree. Shoal has only 6 land masses, only 4 of which remain permanently above water, and 2 of those are at the poles. So we've only got sort of 2 normal land masses. We know we've got a range of temporary islands made of volcanic rock that gets worn away quite quickly by Shoal's heavy tides. And we know that we're going to call one of the areas of volcanic activity the Titan's Teeth. We decided that last week. We know that we've got 2 poles, which will be ice covered. So we can have a lot of fun with Arctic ideas when we get to those. And we know that we're going to have some really unique tides on this moon because it's orbiting a gas giant, and the gas giant has 7 other moons as well. So there's going to be some really interesting tides. If we're going to have quite a lot of tidal activity, that probably means we're going to have quite a lot of sweeping sandy beaches, because the water activity will just wear rock on the edges down into sand. So we're going to have a lot of that we can play about with. We didn't decide whether we were going to have any forests on our land masses or not, but I think we can sort of just start thinking about what sort of things might live on land on Shoal, knowing that these are going to be quite resource spare areas because there's not that much land. Most of the world is water. What do we reckon we might have?
So my thought is that we definitely need some sort of amphibious creature.
So we're going to do amphibians a little bit later down because we've got what I'm calling transitional life. But yes, and I can see Ed Gauss has brought that up as well, is that the slightly submerged ones are going to be interested. We'll come back to those. Let's think about just purely above water life forms.
Okay. Let's see. It's island life. I definitely would imagine some sort of seabird, some sort of like, I don't want to say seagull, but some sort of avian life that would survive in this sort of environment.
Yeah,
would be my first guess.
A lot of small avians that live on the land would make sense, and then maybe some much larger avian species that have the ability, like the albatross, to glide for a long period at a time and fish, and then come back to land only when they need to. So I reckon it would be interesting for Shoal to have a sort of very polar opposite. You've either got small birds or you've got huge birds. And very little in between. What do you guys think about that, chat?
Giga pelican for sure.
Giga pelican, I like that.
It's like, imagine a pelican the size of an SUV. It eats people.
We've got some other ideas coming in. Trilobites in the shallows. We'll get to rock pools and the like in a minute. Remind me of that when we come back to it.
There definitely needs to be some sort of crab creature, if anything, just to piss off Whacker.
Chat is obsessed with crabs, so I'm certain that we are going to have both crabs and crab mechs.
Excellent.
Modified isopods, land-adapted crustaceans, a reverse whale live in the sky.
That would be great.
Cormorants are very cool, yes.
So you know that one in Supreme Commander, they have that destroyer that could like sprout legs and just crawl on land. I'm just imagining like a blue whale. That's that. Just like with spider legs.
Okay, give me a moment to write some of this down.
It's just horrifying.
Small birds to exploit land-based resources. And larger gliding birds to exploit fishing the oceans. Definitely some kind of alien cormorant, because cormorants are cool. I am totally down for that.
What are those? Sorry, I'm not familiar.
Cormorants are a kind of unique bird for how they look and what they do. You'll often see them standing on the shore with their wings spread, like they've kind of got a little shroud because they're drying off. They're a diving bird, so they don't have as many oils on their feathers, so that when they dive, they can dive quite deep and fast to grab fish.
Okay.
And then when they come back up to the surface, they sit very low in the water compared to normal birds, so they have to get out and dry themselves off in the sun. We can have actual birds and flying fish. There's no reason why we can't have both. Crabs should just be crabs, just like Earth. Fair enough.
What if we have flying crabs?
Oh, God. I don't even know how that would work. McPop9 made a really good point. There will be small... Oh, in fact, I'm not going to dictate their size at the minute until we figure things out, but egg-eating mammals to exploit... all the nesting birds.
Beware the flying crabs. They will eat your eggs.
100-pound grazing herd isopods. I do like grazing isopods, though.
Oh, I love that
Especially
idea.
for
That's
all the
great.
moss and lichens that we're saying we're going to have, which makes a lot of sense.
Some sea farmer goes out in the middle of the night and there's just a bunch of squids eating his corn.
So Corbin has very helpfully turned up with sky turtles, but he has brought up something that I do want to talk about,
Oh,
which
I
is
love that.
tortoises. We were talking about potentially having one landmass that would just be known as Skyfall, because it's where a lot of the meteorite debris tends to land. I think it would be really important for us to have some burrowing species to deal with those issues of the heavy weather and the, incursion of space onto the moon.
Okay.
So I definitely
That's
think
a
we
bit
should have some
different.
tortoises, but what else should we have?
I'm
Burrowing
not gonna lie. When you
crabs.
said tortoises and landmass, I had an entirely different thought where one of the continents is actually a giant tortoise.
That was something I was going to bring up when we get to the end of this section is, do we want to have Leviathan life forms who are exactly that
I feel
sort
like
of thing?
yeah.
What do you think, chat? Should we have Leviathans?
I think that they should be a thing, but that should be very much rare to the point where it's sort of like sea monster tales.
Giant life forms are always cool. Always. They should be rare.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so we are going to have some Leviathans. And I think that will also
Excellent.
be a really worthy thing to have, because that's another pressure that explains why we have the Titan mechs.
That is a good point. It does justify why we would have giant mechs.
Yep.
Because I've definitely punched sea creatures in Subnautica with a mech suit.
Yep, and of course that's the wonderful thing about world building, and why we're starting everything this way is, as you put your world together, you find all of these sorts of things that just suddenly tie in and then become potential future story points.
Absolutely.
Do the tortoise, but a whale and in the sky, the flying island. Do we want to go quite that far towards fantasy or not? I'm amazed it's fan art who brought up having a megalodon species rather than Corbin. I'd have expected Corbin to say that.
I have a thought on a flying giant creature like that, but rather than it being a turtle, what if it was a sort of jellyfish-like creature that was filled with like lighter than air gases?
That could be interesting.
Yeah. It's almost, it's not something you'd see often, but it's something that's, you would maybe see with certain cloud patterns or something. I don't know.
Megs
Just off the
go
top of my
without
head.
saying. Thank you, Corbin. A Jarl or an etch. Oh, God, no, we're not having Jarl. We are not having ticks drop from the sky on people.
Oh god, that sounds horrifying. I don't like ticks to begin with.
So, I don't know how many people here saw Aloe and I play through Valheim, but Lillian is referencing a monster from Valheim, which is, of course, set in the Nordic mythos. And Jarl are these giant floating gas bags with ticks nested all along their underside, and they spit acidic fireballs at you and drop ticks, and ticks are just the worst thing because they stick to you and they're enormous and they do massive amounts of damage and they're hard to get off, and oh god, they're terrible. But worst of all, they make this really deep rumbling trumpet sound, and because they turn up in the Mistlands, which, as the name implies, is covered in an impenetrable mystical mist that you need special wisps to see through, you hear them before you see them, and you hear them from like a mile away. And it's terrifying, because that noise is coming at you through damp mist and echoing off of the mountains, and you don't know which direction it's in, and then all of a sudden you're dying to ticks and fireballs.
That sounds like Helldivers.
I have a
I've been in Helldives like that.
small grudge against Jarl. They are not my favourite.
I understand.
Are the sky jellyfish just part of the life cycle, like the Medusa in real life? Some kind of giant polyp elsewhere?
Actually, that's a good point.
Giant floating jellyfish
I like that, 'cause-
creature.
okay.
This is its later life stage.
Later life stage, and basically what it does is it goes into the sky like that to propagate spores that will become more jellyfish.
That would be a great way to spread it. Yeah, that's great. All right, let's see. What else can we see from what chat's been saying? Because chat always has amazing ideas. What about something that's between an otter and an armadillo, able to float on water and dive into the water for food, but has a thick hide
like
cartilage to prevent its gas membranes from being ruptured while bobbing about? That could be
Yeah, it's almost
interesting.
like it's almost like a sand flea where it burrows into the sand and stuff to hunt or just to hide. I like that idea a lot.
Yeah. Jellyfish could have gas bags that have gas heated by digestion so they can float up. That's a good way of explaining how jellyfish might work. I
I
do
like the
have,
sound of that
in
one.
my personal setting that I've built by myself, Hefner, which is a steam fantasy setting. So there's a lot of magic going on in that. It's got proper fantasy elements. I have the meddlesome magus squid is a thing in that setting. And they float about in the air due to how their digestion works. And they are a problem.
Very
I
nice.
do have a short story that features the meddlesome magus squid. If anybody would like to read it at any point, just let me know. It's ridiculous. Okay, flying jellyfish produce gas to float through their digestive process. That's a really good idea. Right, what else can we find?
Right back again.
As a corollary, are the polyps an infectious illness under the right circumstances? Oh, God, we'll come back to that thought later. Sea kangaroos. Explain to me how sea kangaroos are going to work, Corbin. Rabbit-sized krill. Oh my god. Well, we're going to get into the water shortly. We're supposed to be focusing on the land masses at the moment. How do we feel about flowering species? I feel like there's not much. I know somebody mentioned fungi earlier, but I feel like flowering species would be very. Thank you, Saris. Could you maybe not walk on me when I'm trying to do things? Saris says hi. I feel like there wouldn't be that many flowering species, as with so little landmass, it wouldn't necessarily be that beneficial. So they would be very rare, and maybe that makes them really special for land face stuff. Meanwhile, underwater, we could have plenty of different types of flowering coral.
So while I was using the bathroom, I actually did have an idea for more bioluminescent life forms, or maybe sea creatures that could discharge electricity as a defense mechanism.
Yeah?
Something that would
Yeah.
probably be like a deep sea creature in my mind, but yeah.
Flowering floating plants. That's a good idea.
Ooh,
Yes.
that sounds good too. Yeah, something that you would see. Maybe that could be bioluminescent as well.
Yeah, so that's going to come in when we get down a little bit further. All right, let's move on to some of the water stuff, because that's what's really grabbing focus, and it totally makes sense because
Yeah.
this is a predominantly ocean world. So we've got our two large land masses that are permanently above water. Do we want to have fresh water on those land masses, or do we just want to eschew fresh water entirely and just focus on ocean life?
I actually do like the idea of it being freshwater because, for one, it could also explain why the sentient life forms don't go on land very much, because the fresh water is toxic to them, kind of like how the sea is harmful to humans if you drink too much salt water.
Yeah, we could do that.
I've also started playing Subnautica because I want to get in mood for currently what we're talking about.
Fan art, we haven't set a specific size on them. We could make them, the size of the Americas. We could say that, it's the size of Australia, and that's it. We could say that it was smaller than that, bigger than that. We can make it up as we go along, because we haven't set that at the minute. So if we want to have some larger life forms on land, if we want to have more reason for there to be flowers, so we have make those land masses larger, we can still do that at this phase. Yes, we can absolutely make it so that large lakes are a thing.
Yeah, I think on the land masses that would be a good idea to have giant lakes.
Yep. If we
That
want to make the land
some could
masses
empty out.
bigger, then Corbin's making the good point that if we have large land masses, you're going to have rain and storms, and therefore you're likely going to have some fresh water. Okay, so we're going to have some lakes. We've decided we're going to have that big enough. There are lakes on the large land masses. and that would let me play with some fun stuff later on. Because we have decided that Shoal has quite a lot of volcanic activity. There's some really fun stuff you can do with volcanoes and standing water and things that happen on Earth for realsies. I have just a very, very slight obsession with volcanoes. The reason I started my first novel is because I'm kind of fascinated by the Mount St. Helens eruption. So I have a bit of a thing.
Well, it's a hell of an eruption.
Yes. Okay, there are like some of which are really quite huge. Okay. Do we want to start fleshing out some stuff for that, or do we want to move on to the ocean life? Because we've been talking a lot of that. Yeah, different density, different sonar, so things act differently. Shoal is a moon. It is one of 8 moons orbiting the gas giant that it's attached to. It has 3 moons that orbit further out, and then there are 4 moons orbiting closer in, so it has a really quite unique night sky presence. The people of Shoal, however, will only ever see, of those 7 moons, only ever see 6, because one of the moons is geosynchronous on the opposite side of the planet. So
That's fun.
and it's known as the haunted moon, or the hidden moon, because it's never seen from Shoal.
That. There could be all sorts of myths about what's on that moon too.
Yep, I think we're going to have some real fun fleshing that out when we get there. We've already had some initial ideas towards that as to whether it's, a prison moon, whether it's not inhabited at all. We'll have a lot of fun playing with that when we get there. A supervolcano, I mean, if we're going to call this an Earth-like body, which we do seem to be doing that, we decided it was Earth-sized, it's got a lot of features that Earth has, supervolcanoes would effectively have to be a thing. We have them on Earth, and they've been very instrumental to the development of life on our planet. So, yeah, I think having some supervolcanoes under the water on Shoal makes complete sense. I think we should absolutely have some supervolcanoes.
Oh, there definitely needs to be at least one underwater supervolcano. And then the good thing about that is too, we can have all sorts of life that thrives off that higher temperatures.
We have looked at the radiation coming off of the gas giant. We know we've got some massive Van Allen belts that we're dealing with, and I do think most of the creatures that we're looking at would have to have some kind of radiation adaptation to them.
Yeah. And that could be fun too, because it could be like metallic or crustaceans with a metallic skin.
Mm-hmm. And it could also be one of the evolutionary pressures that means that's why some species remain deep ocean species, is because, naturally helps with the radiation issue. You think one of the land masses should be a supervolcano? I think that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, look at Hawaii. There's new islands forming as we speak.
Do we? Yeah, I think it should be one of the normal ones and not one of the poles. Let me see. Let me write it in here. All right, we've got that. Water is an amazing radiation moderator, so you'd probably wind up with an intense dichotomy of radiation-adapted land animals and underwater species that don't need to deal with it. Yes.
Oh, yeah, that's a very good point.
With that much radiation, some species might be radiotrophs. What does that mean? Lily, explain that for the less intelligent of us in the crowd. Me.
Yes, yeah, no, me too. Because my immediate thought was like some kind of xenomorph with radiation powers.
Okay, so we've had a look at that. We know we're going to have some freshwater life, but we'll maybe come back to that because we have been talking a lot about ocean life. So, notable life in the tidal ranges, where we're going to have actual waves, things hitting the things that are living in that active wash backwards and forwards of water. Radiosynthesis, not photosynthesis. That will be something really interesting to think about.
Oh, so they absorb radiation.
Yeah, as a power source.
Interesting.
Certain fungi and bacteria. We did say, somebody did mention earlier that we should have fungi, and yeah, let's put that in. We're going to have fungi on the land masses. Many should be radiotrophs that utilize radiation instead of photosynthesis, which will potentially be a really interesting resource that could be of use to the people who, the sentient species living in the water, and gives them a reason to want to go on land, even beyond getting to the technological point that we're at now. That's a really cool thing to add in.
Yeah, I like the sound of that.
More fungal than actually. Okay, so yeah, we're going to maybe look at fungal forests.
Oh yeah, that would be fun.
I love world building. It's so much fun.
Me too. World building is my favorite.
Plants will be radiosynthetic then, as radiation will always be there, but the sunlight sometimes going away for extended periods. Yes, we had a huge conversation last week about the fact that there's going to be entire seasons where there's no sun, because the gas giant is going to be in the way. So yeah, it
That's
makes
great.
complete sense that radiotrophs solve that problem.
And you know what else? That means that it could very much be that's the reason why there's bioluminescence, because the radiotropes are absorbing that energy.
Lily, can you DM everything you've just said to me so I have it for easy access when I start writing some of this up in more detail?
Oh, absolutely. Side note, if you have ideas for people, please God, just DM them, because I've had to like screenshot things Halien's texted me about the comic, because I'm like, I'm not gonna remember this otherwise.
Have animal life be voracious
Like,
because they've adapted to the radiation and are similar to real-world radiation-resistant life in that they have genetic spell-checking capabilities to keep radiation from doing them harm, but it comes at the cost of a much higher energy cost. Devil Joe lives on Shoal because it hungry. Yes! That is a really
God.
good... Can you DM that to me, please? That is a really, really good explanation of why we can have some larger life forms. Yeah, if anybody has an idea that they want to make sure that I've picked up, that they've made sure that I've considered, please feel free to DM me. My DMs are always open. I don't have them closed. You can find me through the Orcs Discord if you don't have me already. Please, absolutely DM me things for this. I would love to hear your ideas. Okay, we were talking about tidal ranges, so we can also talk about rock pools here as well. And I know somebody mentioned trilobites. I absolutely want to have some kind of trilobite-like species. We know we're going to have alien crabs that can maybe fly? Question marks? What else do we want to have that's in this sort of tidal zone?
I kind of want something that's, so you know, the sorts of evolutionary creatures that were things that just crawled out of the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that might be interesting. Some
Yeah.
sort of primordial creature that
Whirling
almost could
did
be like a
mention...
missing link.
Yeah, Whirling did
Yeah.
mention that one of the earliest creatures that ventured onto land or on our planet was a giant aquatic scorpion several feet in size. We could
Oh
have
my
something
God,
like
really?
that.
That's
Yeah.
that's fucking metal.
Yes, I know exactly what he's referencing with that as well. It's not a Nomolocaris, but I cannot remember the name of the thing that you mean, but I know what you mean, and it was really cool looking. Right, what other amphibians? Psionic snails. We should absolutely have psionic snails, and they should be huge.
Do we have a giant frog?
We don't yet, but I don't see any reason why we shouldn't have some kind of giant frog. Is there an
Absolutely.
issue with frogs and salt water, and how do we overcome that if there is? If you have giant mushrooms, something needs to eat them. Rounded trilobites burrowing into the mushroom for safety and food. Oh, I like that. Let me go back up here. Fungal forests. Fungal trilobite type things that burrow into the mushrooms. Right, what else have we got? Carnivorous clams.
Yes.
I love that.
I love carnivorous clams because that's the last thing people will expect.
Okay. There are frogs that live in salt water. They eat crabs.
Oh, perfect.
Eurypterid. Thank you, Rimwood. Eurypterid. That's the name of the giant scorpion. Terrestrial frogs cannot survive in salt water, but we're talking convergent evolution, so it doesn't have to matter. You're quite right. You are quite right. Okay, so we want some salt water amphibians because frog. Okay. There's a type of mollusk with an 8-plated shell and iron teeth called chitin. Could be a major predator of mineral-shelled organisms. Okay.
I like the sound of that.
Chitin equivalent mollusk that eats other shelled organisms. That's a great idea. I feel like we should have some kind of ridiculous octopus species that lives in rock pools and takes advantage of the tide when it's in, and then they shelter in the rock pools when the tide is out because they're soft-bodied.
Some sort of some sort of ambush predator I think would be interesting. That's like an octopus.
Hello, Zintha. How are you doing? Well, welcome to our nonsense. Creatures that consume amount of silica along with the flora that grows in it. Using rock layers they consume by just acting like a biological snow shovel to form carapace of heavier matter that can block the worst of the stellar radiation. Notable because their digestive systems are super robust and their excrement would be super refined heavy metals and gems the body could not use that could endure the digestion process. Okay. There is a kind of deep ocean snail that lives near the thermal vents. They have iron in their shells, so it will be a possibility even at surface. So we've decided that we really like the idea of iron snails.
Iron snail is great.
Scaly-foot gastropod.
Interesting.
Intelligent blue-ringed octopus hides from rads in pools and hunts at high tides. Can water jet barbs to snare prey and bring it in like a biological harpoon. Yeah, that's a terrifying idea. All right, we're not going to have that much longer left this week, which is not to say we can't add more creatures in time. This is not the only stream where we can do that. But do we want to think about some shallow ocean life that only lives in shallow oceans?
I think some sort of sand flake creature would be fun. If you're familiar with what those are like.
Okay. I feel like we do need to have some kind of just normal sort of turtle-like, turtle-adjacent awesomeness. We need some of that.
Oh yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, we need some turtle-adjacent nonsense. Yeah, blue-ring octopi are terrifying. Amphibian octopus with very long tentacles that hangs from the mushroom forest waiting for prey to stumble underneath. The droptopus.
Yes.
Do we need a droptopus, chat?
Droptopus for sure.
This is why there are no drop bears on shoal. The droptopus ate them all. We are kind of building Space Australia, yes.
That's what makes it fun.
I think we need to have some shallow ocean shark equivalents.
Yeah, some sort of shallow shark would be good.
Yeah. I'm also thinking, so one of the things I did for my setting of Hevna was when I was world building for that, I knew I was going to have a magic system. I knew how my magic system was going to work, that it was going to be, I have magic storms that pass across the planet. When there's a storm in your area, magic is freely available. When a storm has passed by, you're then in a period where there's no magic other than what you've stored in the right kind of receptacle. And because I decided that, you know, this was going to be a natural part of the ecosystem, the life on the planet should have evolved to make use of that. So I have magic variant animals that make use of the special thing from my setting. I feel like we should do that with Shoal as well, and we should have it the other species also make use of the coral in some way or the other. And I feel like sharks, psionic sharks, might be fun. How do we feel about psionic sharks?
That sounds great.
Sunshine Temple in Hevna, yes, there absolutely are. There are areas of the planet that have such magically reactive plants because so many storms pass over it that they're basically impenetrable. The first book that I'm writing, one of its borders is the Savage Edge, and the reason that border is there is because it is a section of jungle that is so magically charged in the plant life, you just can't cross it by land. It will just kill you. Epaulet sharks are a thing on Earth. I will put in here to have a look at
What?
epaulet sharks. What else have we got coming up? I might have just invented giant mesmers, yes. And because we decided that we were going to name the coral that has the psionic bit, you know, with an H, and make it this sort of song thing, does this mean we've just invented singing sharks? Or humming sharks?
I love the idea of sharks humming the Jaws theme while they're chasing you. Psionic sharks with parasitic symbiotic psionic coral armor. I don't know whether we'll do that on a shark, but I like the idea of that is an interesting idea.
Psionic coral armor. I mean, if nothing else, we can certainly stick that on things like crabs because we know they do that. What can we do with anglerfish? That's going to be deep ocean life.
Coral crab would be pretty fun.
Yes.
It's like a crab creature that's a coral hybrid.
Mm-hmm. An anglerfish with coral in its lure. Okay, let's move down here to deeper life. Anglerfish with coral lures. Because we're certainly going to have things that will eat coral. So yeah, that will be really good.
Got to.
Yes, the idea of sticking psionic armor onto creatures that are being tamed. That's a really good idea. We'll have to come back to that when we get to doing our sentient species, but yeah, that's amazing. I feel like we should have nautiloids. I feel like nautiloids...
Like crab people?
Not as crab people, but just creatures that are nautilus-like, including, you know, giant ones, like from the early ages of the Earth.
I'm here for it.
To the point where, potentially, if we decide to have nautiloid semi-leviathans, maybe that was an early civilization building material. People lived in their shells when they died.
Ooh. I like that idea.
Ever play Sunless Sea? I don't like where this line of questioning is going. Please continue. This will be cool. Yes. By all means, Zinthar, throw ideas at me based on that. Nautiloid house is fun. We'll have to try and remember that. We want nautiloid houses. I'll write it down.
Nautiloid housewives.
Okay, what other ideas do we have? Because we're not going to have a huge amount longer. To the best of my knowledge, Tex and Dep will be up at the half hour. I'm technically only supposed to go till 5, but we can push it just a little bit. But we're not going to push it quite as much as we did last week. I want to be out of here by 1:15 at the latest.
Yeah, don't want to overstay your welcome. I've been there. It's like, oh, I want to draw something else, but oh, we only have like 5 minutes left.
I don't want to get thrown into the cargo mines. Leith still has a grudge. Engineer gobies just minding their own business, making tunnels. Oh, we should absolutely have some gobies in the shallow ocean life.
Ooh, yeah, there needs to be some kind of tunneling creature.
Ridiculous tunneling gobies of some kind.
What if there was a creature that kind of lived in the lava tube and was tunneling through that?
Oh yeah, we'll absolutely have to do something in the deep ocean. But what I really want to ask you, chat, what are we going to do with the concept of shrimp? What do we want to do?
You mean to tell me a shrimp fried this rise?
Tube worms? We definitely need tube worms.
What if we make shrimp like velociraptors from Jurassic Park?
We should. You know what? We really should have some.
Like predatory shrimp? Why not?
Schooling piranha shrimp.
Yes, piranha shrimp.
Bullet shrimp.
Yes.
Mantis shrimp the size of wolves. That's terrifying.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah, bobbit worms have come up a couple of times. I'm going to move them down to deep ocean for now because that seems to be.
Sarah, you've been for a walk, you've pooped, you've peed, you don't need to go out, girl.
All right. What about amphibians? Let's take a moment to think about amphibians. We have said that we need to consider the concept of throg. We need some giant frogies. What else do we need amphibian wise? Welcome in Exile 40k. Enjoy joining the orcs. It's a fun time. It's also insane. You know, wear armor. You'll be fine. Swarming eels.
Ooh.
Swarming eels. I like that. Would they be shallow or deep ocean or both?
I could see them as shallow end creatures.
Yeah, transitory is the better word. You are right. Crabs are often amphibious. So I will do what you want, chat. More crabs. I understand. Yep, some kind of croc equivalent. I feel like it might be fun to have something that's the equivalent of a croc and a Komodo dragon combined. Because that would be cool.
Certainly be fun.
Hermitar. You want me to
yeah.
make hermitars?
Giant heavy crabs.
Manatees. Yes, we need something that's an adorable.
Ooh, yeah. Manatee-esque creatures would be good.
Eels large enough to wrap mechs like anacondas. Yes, and I think they should be a deep ocean thing.
Give them barbs.
Awesome. Comodile. Deep ocean adapted crocodiles. They dive into the abyssal zones and are an everyone issue. We did also say that we were going to think about some sort of megalodon equivalents as well, which I'm going to have to because otherwise Corbin will find me and kill me.
No, boy.
Can't have that.
I want something that's kind of like a placoderm, armored fish, but has short stubby legs to move onto land where they nest. I like that.
Oh, that'd be fun.
So, nesting
Already been out so much.
placoderms.
Can you please? Pip. Pip. Pip.
Manatees that can walk on land as well as water. For the shrimp to hunt. Excellent. Excellent. Sea cows, yep. Hagfish as a pest species, yes. They are traditionally quite a deep ocean thing. we might need to look at having them in other areas as well. But yeah, I think having hagfish and hagfish equivalents as well, because the hagfish do what they do really well, but aren't really, you know, that common because we're not as water-based as this world. I think having some more species that use that sort of defense mechanism would be really interesting. Saltwater hippos. Do we need saltwater hippos?
Oh my god. I don't think we do, but that sounds
I
great.
think we should. We should have them be a shallow species.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
And they'd have huge communes that float on the surface and form their own sort of little drifting ecosystems. So, you know, you just have this huge pod of hippos that's just floating across the ocean, supporting its own little biosystem of insects and perching birds. Yeah, and of course they are as terrifying as hippos. We should do that. That's terrifying. And they could be hunted by the gigabirds. It's all coming together, chat. We have excuses for all of the ridiculousness so far.
I love it when a shitpost comes together.
We've talked about jellyfish, Synthar, including floating jellyfish who use the warm gases from the digestive system to just, you know, float in midair and be an everyone problem. Diving monkeys that live on the backs of floating animals. Yep, diving monkeys are a great idea.
They're parasites that clean the giant.
Then they're amphibious, so they've got like webbed hands and feet.
Yep. Symbiotic with floating animals, eat their parasites, adapted for swimming. That's a pretty cool idea. Welcome in on digestive system. Same things are going on in here, Doctor. Nothing to worry about. We're not inventing the world's scariest ocean life, I promise.
Definitely not.
Lampreys. Yes, we need to have some lampreys.
Oh, my favorite.
Otter monkeys, yeah. Yes, Subnautica is, in fact, a horror game.
It absolutely is.
Sea leeches? Yeah, we should definitely have some sea leeches. They sound like a great idea. We have come up with some terrible things here, which is really good because all of these things are not evolutionary pressures, but pressures on a sentient species that give us a reason why we went down the route of mechs. Why do we need all these different mechs with all these different purposes? What are they here to deal with? Why this instead of other things? Well, because we've made Ocean Australia. We do need whales.
Creatures in the ocean.
We do need whales. You're absolutely right. Now, what were you saying is going to be special about these whales? We need whales, giant whales that defend themselves by emitting sonar wave pulses like Navy ships do and totally tear apart anything near them when they do.
That sounds great.
Have you guys heard what a modern sonar ping sounds like if you're underwater? Because everybody thinks,
good from what I've heard.
Everybody thinks of the classic sonar ping from, you know, movies where you just get that one tone. That is not what a modern sonar ping sounds like. Modern sonar pings are terrifying and oh my god, they're loud.
It makes a lot of sense, honestly. Because those sonar pings are no joke.
Yes, they can hurt. They'll kill you if, yeah, all sorts of problems. But yeah, it's worth looking up on YouTube. You know, underwater sonar sound. It's haunting and oh god, loud. There's a theory that the sperm whale ping is loud enough to stun prey. I could believe it. We have not touched on the concept of giant squid so far. And I feel like we need to touch on the subject of giant squid as maybe our last thing we do
There needs to
this
be
week.
a kraken of some kind, I feel.
Speaking of sonar hunting, there's a mod for a game called Barotrauma that gives you the realistic sonar. Do not be out in the water with the sonar going. Yeah, I mean, Barotrauma's trying to kill you at the best of
Oh.
times, let alone with that going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
can see how that's gonna go. You're just gonna turn some guy's brain into jelly. It's gonna be like the scene from Scanners.
So I think we need to do something really unique with our idea of a kraken, because we should have one, but I feel that it should be it should make use of the coral and just be one of the most terrifying things in the ocean. So we're going to have a psionic coral kraken. It's going to be an ambush predator, masquerades as a deep coral node, and probably causes froth. Froth, for your information, Crispy, if you haven't been here, is a mind illness we've decided that should come from suddenly being in a coral dead zone. And I reckon that the coral kraken should be able to generate a brief dead zone and inflict things around it with froth for easy grabbing of the prey.
Oh, yeah, I like the sound of that.
And its coral is fed on the bones of its victims. So it just keeps getting
fun.
bigger. It's also immortal. There you go. I have invented a kraken that's terrible. Deep water squid that makes a low sound to stun prey at short range called boomers. You need drums in the deep. Okay. Boomer squid that stun prey with infrasound. Drums in the deep. Yeah, you're damn right the psionic kraken doesn't believe in Taco Tuesday. The fact that Tuesday doesn't exist on Shoal is neither here nor there. Giant glass sponge that creates its own ocean currents. That might be something to look at next week when we do Leviathans. Keep that in mind. What if there's a colony of squid making up a giant kraken surrounding the coral node? Okay. It means losing a few of them won't be super detrimental and makes reassembling to fit the situation as needed a reality. Could have them essentially puppeting bones, shells, creation, bunch of other possibilities. Okay, yeah, we'll put that down as a possibility. The psionic coral kraken probably eats tacos on Friday rather than Tuesday. Well, I mean, it is possibly the most evil thing I've written all week. So, yeah, why not? Good evening, Mo. You're coming in just as we're about to wrap up. We've been making terrible, scary ocean creatures because we decided that we needed to, you know, make Subnautica, but worse. Semi-sentient squid that use rudimentary tools. Do we want to do that with squid, or do we want to go with some kind of octopus? Octopus that does that.
I don't know. I think squid or octopus. Either one would be pretty fun, honestly.
I like the idea of octopi doing that because I think it makes a bit more sense with their body shape.
Yeah, I can see that.
All right. We've got just a couple more minutes. Is there any last thoughts that you want me to write down today, chat, before we have to call it for the week? And then next week, we'll make some Leviathans. Tube worms? Absolutely. I think I mentioned... Yeah, I've already got tube worms on the list. I already have them. Cute cuttlefish using tools, like kobolds. Let's make them a shallow water. Okay, cuttlefish that use basic tools. They're like kobolds. Big ass dragonflies. I see no reason why we shouldn't have those. I think we also, if we're going to have big ass dragonflies and birds and big old mushroom trees for things to be done from, we're going to need big ass spiders. Pip, excuse you. All right, let's see. Anything else that I want to note down?
Pip.
Starfish that rotate through the water like a propeller.
Shuriken fish.
Giant spider crabs. Yeah, why not?
I mean,
Just a worse coconut crab.
all crabs are just.
Yeah, that sounds good.
spiders.
Where do I want to put this? I want to put this down here. Coconut crabs, but way worse. We'll make some of those. That works. Trapdoor spiders. We did say we were going to have some burrowing species. So, yep. Doctor, keep that idea for next week because I love the idea, the concept of a Leviathan crab that does exactly that and wears a mech as a shell and should be a named character when we get to the point where we're writing characters.
Oh, that is pretty
That
fun.
would be a really cool idea for that. Whistling spiders. Sure, why not? Rolling urchins, we're going to have Katamari.
Underwater dung beetles.
Katamari urchins that roll everything up.
That's great.
We need more prey. Yes, I will be very happy to fill in some more prey species, either from you guys or in downtime between streams when I get the opportunity. Whistling spider, they whistle by rubbing their fangs together. They stridulate their fangs. That's horrifying. Why am I writing these things down? I could just ignore you.
It's more fun this way.
Rabbit-sized krill. And we also need to do next week as well. I think we need to do a proper dive into what we want to do with bioluminescence. Next week, Leviathans and bioluminescence. Let me come down here because this will remind me. There we go. Giant kangaroo rat. Kangaroo rats would make sense for the kind of land that we're looking at. I can spell, I swear. All right, we are at 1/4 the hour. Tex and Depp are due up at 1/2, so I'm going to be very good and I'm going to, you know, slide out of here before I get thrown in the cargo mines and make sure the airwaves are clear. I'm also going to go and have some dinner and think about all these horrifying things you guys have come up with. Sentient
Dinner
life
does sound
forms,
good.
they will be a future stream, Grimos. I want us to have the world all sorted so that we can think about all these things that we've invented and the pressure that they would put on how that kind of society would develop. The sorts of things that they might develop religious ideas around, would change potentially, you know, how big their communes are, whether they have permanent settlements or whether that's just not possible. We need to do a lot of this first, I think. So yeah, I'm going to get out of here. You guys have had some great ideas. Thank you very much, Krispy, for talking about comic book writing and everything you're up to.
Hey,
I would love to
I'm
have you
glad to
back
be
in the
here.
future to talk some more about it as you develop that. And I'm sure chat would be interested
Absolutely.
in that as well. And yeah, thank you,
Absolutely
chat.
awesome.
This stream is only this good because you guys bring all of your ideas to the table and share your thoughts and push back against my terrible bad takes. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of the BPL and the orcs and all the craziness that goes along with that. And thank you for choosing to spend your time with us.
You're here.
Why are you here? Have a wonderful
well.
afternoon. Have a great weekend. Krispy and I are out. Good night, folks.
Goodbye.
And